Okay. Sorry to hear that. I hope that you get better or get well soon. So what I have here is a study that I've composed for you, and I can see that you're on here now. And basically, the point of this is that if you make a move, I should be able to see it. So try and make any move with the white pieces, and like just make any move that you'd like, and I should be able to see it in live. Yeah. And now if I make a move with black like this, then you're able to see it. Correct?
Alright, yeah.
Okay, great. Um, would you be okay with this session being recorded? It will be uploaded on YouTube, but it will be private until you want it to be public, if ever.
Um, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay, great. So you asked me to help you with a couple of things, and I went through and I really tried to understand what would be the best way to help you. So you told me that you were focusing on the Queen's Gambit as well as the Carl Khan for your openings, and you wanted to improve there. You also wanted to learn attacking on the king side, um, which is all very, very interesting ideas, and I definitely think that you should explore them even on your own time. But I hope that with this lesson, we'll kind of be able to catapult your learning. So what do you think I have set up here in this first chapter?
I would assume just like the general positions I'm looking for after the Queen's Gambit.
Yeah. So this is the Queen's Gambit, like ideal, like dream structure, right? If you got to play like a million free moves, then this is what you would want to have. Your knights on the third rank, your pawns in a structure like this, in the center, your rooks are connected, your queen and bishop are looking at this, and this bishop is outside of this pawn chain, ideally. So the bishop in red is outside of this pawn chain in red. And you'll have a very, very good game if you start off from this kind of structure. But how do we get to that? Well, in this chapter, we'll be taking a look at some of the principles and the ideas behind the Queen's Gambit. So the Queen's Gambit obviously starts with white playing d4 to control these squares, and black replies with d5. And then c4 is the Queen's Gambit. And it sounds similar to the King's Gambit, but unlike the King's Gambit, it's actually very, very calm, it's very solid, and doesn't lead to any tactically challenging lines in most cases. But before we get started with all of that, I want to ask you, what would you play if instead of d5, black played something like h6 here? What would be your reply?
Honestly, I'm not sure. I haven't studied like the opening very much, so anything beyond d5, I'm kind of clueless. And
Okay.
I know you can't like explain every line, but I'm not sure.
Okay, no worries. So, have you heard of the principle that in chess we want to control the center?
Yeah.
Yeah, so these 16 squares at the center of the board are as influential, if not more, than all the other squares combined. They matter a lot, and that's why you always want to control these center squares as much as possible. Now, if your opponent plays h6, what's a good move to control the center?
Just pushing up the e-pawn.
Yeah, exactly. You got it. So, as you can see, if we were allowed this, then we would have this massive, beautiful center, and we take control of, all of these crucial squares, and now our opponent is always going to be on the back foot. So that's actually why black even plays d5, and a lot of beginner players don't seem to know that. Anyways, the Queen's Gambit follows with c4, challenging the center, and black plays e6, supporting. Now, to a beginner player, do you know why here, instead of e6, d takes c4 is not a free pawn?
Because I'm just gonna push out the e-pawn and take with bishop.
Yeah, exactly. After e3, black has a very, very difficult time defending this pawn. If they really force it, then they can put something like b5. And what would you play here? Do you know?
I'd play. I'd move the a pawn up, open up the a file.
Yeah, exactly. a4. And if black further supports their pawn, if they obviously can't play a6, right? Why not?
So if I takes, he takes, then I take the rook.
Yeah, exactly. You got it. So if instead of a6, black says, alright, I'm going to support my pawn using the c pawn, like this, with c6, now what? This is a bit harder to see.
Could be knight c3.
That's an idea, but there's an immediately winning idea, and it actually has to do with just taking. And if after a takes b5, black plays c takes b5, do you see a tactic? It actually immediately wins the game. The game is over, right here.
I don't see it.
No worries. So the diagonal that has just been opened with this move is this diagonal, right? The h1 to a8 diagonal, we would say. Or I guess I should draw it like this. Okay? And we can take advantage of this by placing our queen on the diagonal with a move like queen to f3. And now, black basically gets a choice of which of the three pieces that I've highlighted in blue they want to lose. Because there's no way of keeping them all intact. Obviously, if black doesn't play anything, if black plays some random move like h6, then we can just take the rook. And we're up a full rook. If black wants to give up their bishop instead, then they can do that. They can give up their bishop, and then they can save their rook. Now that it's protected. Or black can choose to... Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's tricky.
Yeah, or if black wants to give their knight, they can do that as well, right? Okay, so that's basically why d takes c4 all the way back here isn't a very, very good idea. It's not like a bad idea, it's not losing, but generally speaking in chess, you want to maintain this tension. So what do I mean by tension? Well, as you can see in this position, these two pawns can both capture one another, but neither player wants to. And with tension, you get lots of interesting positions, and you'll generally benefit from it. So right now, I can't really explain to you exactly why this is like better than capturing, but just take my word for it for now, and maybe when you're stronger, we'll go into it more.
Okay.
Okay. Anyway, sorry?
I think I can, like, kind of understand why, though.
Okay. Yeah, I mean...
By,
mm-hmm.
like, black knowing that the bishop follows and it's terrible to defend, that's probably enough to keep most players from taking.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Okay, but then my question to you, if you really understand it, is why can't white just take?
I thought white normally took in this line.
Oh, really? Okay, that's interesting. So we don't, I mean, we can take, and it's perfectly fine to take, but I would actually recommend that you don't, until you have a very good reason to. Preserving the tension and keeping it alive in the center is a good idea, generally speaking. And while it's much worse for black to take than white to take, it's still not a good idea most of the time. Not always. There's always exceptions. But here, we'll just gloss over this point for now because it is a little nuanced. And we'll just continue with knight c3, developing and controlling these center squares. Knight f6, controlling those squares again. Knight f3, controlling these set of squares, and then bishop to e7, getting ready to castle. Obviously, if black played bishop d6, then we can just play bishop g5, right? Getting this pin in, and now this knight doesn't work, essentially. Like, it's kind of a dead knight, and we can take this pawn, right? Because this knight no longer works, essentially. So, and then black would just be forced to move their bishop back. So it's much faster for black to just play bishop e7 directly and save a tempo. And then after something like bishop g5 anyways, black is getting ready to castle, whereas white is going to do the same. The moves in green are going to be like your first moves, right? So you want to play e3 and then bishop out to d3. And then you want to follow that up by placing your queen there, and then you're going to castle your king. And then eventually you want to bring your rook into the game. And I'll do that in blue for you. And after this, you can see how it's pretty similar to the Queen's Gambit structure that we had over here.
Right. Just a little bit more developed, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, it's about the same. I mean, I need my here. I mean, I can give myself a million free moves like this, and you can see how it's starting to resemble it.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah. Okay, great. Sorry for skipping all that.
Uh,
Yeah. And then obviously my
sorry,
pawn's
my pawn
coming.
under died.
Oh, okay.
I'm good now. No worries.
Are you ready to move on?
Yep.
Okay. Are you happy with playing the Queen's Gambit right now, or would you like me to teach you an opening that I think would be beneficial as white, in basically becoming like, you know how, actually here, do you play any sports by any chance?
No, not right now.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I've in the past.
Okay. Like what?
I played soccer and baseball when I was younger.
Mm. Okay. So do you remember how when you were like a little kid and you were playing soccer? I don't know if you had the same experience that I did, but basically no one wanted to be like a defender or like a goalie, like as a kid.
Right.
And this was because,
Yeah.
we all wanted to go out there and score. And actually, this was beneficial for a lot of us developmentally, like to become better soccer players as kids, because essentially we were put in more situations where we would have to like take action and actually shoot the ball or like be running with it up the field or doing something other than just, playing a more relaxed position for most of the game as a defender, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
In chess, you can apply a similar idea because the Queen's Gambit is a pretty like it's a solid opening and everything. It's a good choice, but it's kind of boring in the way that it's similar to like playing defense in soccer as a kid. I mean, yes, you're still playing the game, and of course you might still have fun, but it's not as fun or as challenging as playing as an attacker and really, or like, someone that's going to run up the field and be scoring all the time. It's more of a relaxed opening. So if you'd want the flip side, if you want like an attacking opening, then I could teach you that right now, or we can just skip over and go to the Caricon as you initially wanted.
Um, I think just go to the Karaoke just
Okay.
because I know kind of limited on time.
Yeah, of course. Okay, so looking at this position here, right? This is just a starting position of the game. And imagine your friend said that, okay, you know what, let's make chess a little more interesting. I'll get rid of two pawns and you get rid of two pawns. And wh- I just want you to think about it this way. Which side would you rather have? White if they got rid of the center two pawns, or black if they got rid of the outside two pawns?
Rather be playing black.
Yeah,
Control
exactly.
the center.
Yes, exactly. And that's also why people say that you want to capture generally towards the center because controlling the center is very, very important in chess. And these outside pawns, right, compared to the center pawns, aren't worth nearly as much. In fact, some like old chess books have like weird denominations for how much pawns are worth. And they say that pawns on the outside are worth about like a half pawn, whereas these pawns are worth about 1.5 pawns. So you'd be much better off, with your center pawns intact. And that's actually one of the ideas behind the Caricon to begin with. After e4, c6, d4, d5, if black were to take, right, if white were to take, e takes d5, c takes d5, what's happened here is that white has traded a center pawn for one of our outside pawns. Or not outside, but like a c-file pawn.
I never even thought about the fact that you're trading a more outside pawn for inside pawn. I thought it was more just like only about challenging the center immediately. That
Yeah,
makes sense actually.
yeah, it's both things, and it's really interesting if you think about it this way, because pawns are really the soul of chess. They really dictate how the game should be played, and so this is one of the first things that you should think about. Now, if if I were to get rid of all the pieces, like if I just deleted all of the pieces, and on both sides, then what I would be left with is this structure of four pawns on the queen side for for white and only 3 for black. However, we'd have this kingside majority and also a majority in the center, right? And so basically the Caro-Kann would then revolve around you utilizing your center majority to win the game. But that's at a very high level. And at like our lower levels, it's more so just about like tactics and whatnot. So we'll just continue with the opening. The most common line is obviously e5, the advanced Caro-Kann. And now I want you to like bring your bishop out. Bishop f5. There's another line. I don't know what you like play all the time, but the other line is c5, challenging the center, and we can waste a move essentially playing c6, c5 because black or white has done e4, e5, right? Wasted 2 pawn moves, so we can do the same here. And obviously, if white captures, then we can even immediately win back our pawn if we really want it that badly, right? Check, something like this. Or we can just, if we don't want to win the pawn back immediately, we can just relax, even play something simple like knight c6 and be okay here. Anyways, the most common, variation after if we just push c5 is just knight f3, knight c6, c3, and then something like bishop g4. And our ideas, again, are very natural. We want this knight on f5. We want to get our bishop here in the yellow afterwards, and we want to castle, essentially. Does that make sense? Okay, great. So continuing with the advanced variation instead, I hope I'm not moving too quickly here. Bishop f5, knight c3, e6, opening up this diagonal, g4, supported by the queen. We want to go back, bishop g6, knight ge2, something like c5, challenging the center finally, and then something like h4, trapping our bishop, and we just play h5. I don't really want to go further than this because then I'm just going to be asking you to like memorize this line, but definitely explore it on your own time when you have some time, because the Caro-Kann is a very, very interesting line. And there's been a lot of development in it in the past like 10 or so years. So I definitely recommend that you go study more, but generally this is the kind of structure that you're going to be getting, or something like the other one that we discussed here. And these are essentially going to be your 2 springboards to getting off to a good opening. Generally speaking, you just want to remember that you want to develop all your pieces and not move any piece more than it needs to be moved in the opening. Okay.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So let's move on to your game analysis. You sent me an interesting game against What's Popping 01, a 450 rated opponent. And the game started with e4. You played this Caro-Kann, c6, knight f3, d5, e takes, c takes. So this isn't like a mistake by your opponent, right? And obviously it's not like the game is over or anything, but now you have this advantage already that your opponent just gifted you for no reason. You have the center majority, and your opponent only has 1 pawn in the center, which means that eventually you'll have winning chances by just running your pawns down the center of the board. But that's like a long-term thing to think about. Just like keep it in the back of your mind, maybe. Bishop b5, bishop d7, and I won't like comment too much on the game. Your opponent just hung a bishop here, which is a little uncharacteristic, I guess. But yeah, I know that blunders are very, very common, even up to like 1,000 rating on like chess.com. I feel like people just hang pieces all the time. So honestly, like if you had to take one thing away from today, it would be to not hang pieces. And I actually have a set of rules for you that I'll send over to you, and we'll talk about it shortly. And yeah, but anyways, ignoring the fact that your opponent just hung a bishop, this is one of your first mistakes, playing bishop c6. So I can understand your thought process for why you wanted your bishop here. Obviously, it controls this beautiful diagonal and whatnot. However, your bishop is kind of stuck, okay? It's staring at this rock of a pawn here on d5. This pawn isn't going to be moving anytime soon, right? Like it can't really, I mean, your opponent doesn't need to let you move this pawn at all. So his bishop is actually looking at absolutely nothing, if you think of it that way.
And it's blocking the knight. I didn't even notice that.
Oh yeah, that as well. You're essentially treating this bishop like it's a pawn, and you shouldn't do that because bishops are much stronger than that. They control an entire diagonal, and it would have been better if you just brought it back here to control this diagonal and maybe even hop out to g4 like this. Okay. Anyways, the game continued. Oh yeah, this is another weird move by you. I mean, that's not that weird, but it's just something to think about. You played bishop b4, and this is generally an okay idea if you have something that you're pinning, right, on e1, but you don't. This knight is free to move, and your opponent does move his knight. He could also have defended it just moving his bishop here. Sorry, I'll do it in red. But, and continue the game normally. Or he could have defended by moving his queen and then continue the game normally. And also, you would have faced the problem in a higher weighted game of your opponent playing something like this eventually. Pretend this knight isn't hanging. So, here, after this, let's play this queen move. And let's just castle for black. Then your opponent could do something like this. And this could get a little annoying, because this pin, you have no way of getting rid of this pin other than bringing your own bishop back. Does that make sense? So
So the move didn't really accomplish anything, and it just set me up for a problem.
yeah, like you're basically wasting a move, and you should have probably, instead of b4, you should have probably just played bishop to e7 instead, if that makes sense.
I think I struggled to make moves like that because it kind of seems like, what's the term? I think people say quiet. Like, it doesn't really look like it's immediately doing anything, so I automatically shy away from it. But
That's interesting. That's interesting. Yeah, I think that's definitely a problem that a lot of players have. But you have to remember that, unlike the movies, chess isn't all about like going all in, attacking all the time, and then like, saying check and mate like for good reason. It's chess is a very, very beautiful game, and it's pretty complex. But just remembering this idea that if you move your bishop all the way out here, just have to move it back is a very, very simple way of remembering it, right? Okay, great. The game continued after, knight a4, you castled, and a3 was played, kicking your bishop away. And here is a weird decision by you. You want to double his pawns, which makes sense. And now you have some very natural developmental ideas, but instead of going into that, you play knight c6, presumably targeting this pawn and also just, naturally developing your knight. But this doesn't accomplish as much, and it leads to difficulties, as you'll see, with rook b1. And now this pawn is hanging, right? And it's difficult to defend this pawn because your knight and pawn are going to be very loose very shortly, as you'll see. Actually, you make it worse than it has to be by playing b5. You just leave your knight hanging, and your opponent could have taken this knight at any point that they wanted. But they didn't. Instead, they played a takes b5. You played b takes b5, or sorry, a takes b5, leaving your knight hanging again. Queen takes b5, rook b8, your knight's hanging again. But this time, it's okay. It's okay because, you took... This is the only time he takes your knight, and it's actually the only time where he can't because he hangs his rook. So it's a little funny how you guys, like, continuously counter blunder. Here you just hang your knight. Sorry, yeah?
Okay, last night I looked at this game, like, kind of in preparation, like, what you were going to say to me, and I saw that I hung this knight, like, 3 times, and I kind of got a feeling of dread.
Sorry. No, it happens.
He didn't take it, right?
Yeah.
Not for a while.
Yeah, he didn't even take it for a while. No, I mean, I do this all the time. I think last week I literally hung like a full queen. I mean, it happens to everybody, but I mean, you just have to try and minimize it as much as possible. He played f4, and only after he played f6, kicking his knight, did he realize that knights moved in L's. So then he took your knight. And the game kind of just continued. I mean, here he hangs his queen too, which is good for you. And the game ends pretty uneventfully. You find a mate, which is pretty good. It's not really like perfect or anything, but obviously I don't expect that from you. But yeah, good play. Do you have to leave exactly at 6? Because I can stay a little bit after if you're okay with it.
I'm good for a little while.
Okay, great. So here's something that might take a while. It's called mating practice. When did you start playing the game again?
Probably like 2 weeks ago.
Oh, really? No way. Like, you literally started playing chess 2 weeks ago, or like you learned it before and you just got back into it?
So I learned how the pieces move in elementary school, and then I never played it again.
Right.
And then I got back into it like 2 weeks ago with PogChamps and everything.
Ah, makes sense. Okay, maybe this will be too difficult then. You know, here, let's swap it out for a queen and play this instead. Are you on this chapter 11 screen?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Here, you play the white pieces, I'll play the black ones, and you mate me, okay? So, yeah, good job. If you don't know how to, you can just give up at any point. You have until, let's say, 30 moves to mate me. So that was the first one.
Cutting out a lot.
Yeah, I apologize. I think there's something wrong with my Wi-Fi. Hello?
Hi.
Hi, sorry about that. I think there's a mistake with my Wi-Fi, or something wrong with my Wi-Fi. Is everything okay for you?
Well, let me turn you up. Yeah, it just sounded like you were lagging for a second there.
Yeah, my bad. I probably was. I'm on my data now. You should be working fine.
You're on your phone?
Yeah, I'm on my phone on my data. Can you hear me okay? Like, it should be better than before. Can you hear me? Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, is everything okay?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Yeah, okay, great. Do you want to continue? I just played King C4.
Sure.
Yeah,
Oh, I didn't see it.
you're good.
I'm supposed to, like, mirror your moves, one square away, right?
I think you're thinking about opposition, and yeah, I mean, you can think of it that way. That's an interesting way of thinking of it. Just make sure that you don't stalemate me. Since
I was
you,
about to say.
yeah, since you watch a lot of PogChamps, it might just be in your blood.
So, I know I'm supposed to have the, king defend the queen, and I push you into the corner,
Yeah,
but I don't actually know how to get the, king, like, into that position.
why don't you try this? You see my arrows, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, now you have to wait again, so maybe here and then here.
Right.
Oh, but be careful, because this immediately is stalemate, so you need like a check in between. Maybe queen here is best. Yeah, queen there is probably best. And then after I move, I can bring your king in. Yeah. And now you can mate me. Excellent. Here, find another mate here. There's 2 mates here, or 3 mates total, rather. Maiden ones.
Isn't just. You're
So,
talking about like this.
no, I can still move. There's a maiden too.
Um,
Okay, wait. So, here, what I want you to think about critically is that the king controls these 3 squares, right?
oh,
Yeah, that's one. And one more.
oh, just
Yeah, there you go. Found that one all by yourself. No, but yeah. Essentially, you want to remember this position, okay? With the king, both the kings in opposition like this, one square away from one another, and a queen on the side. Now, I know that it's a little tougher with the rook, but I'll quickly. Do you want to skip this for now? We can skip this for now if you think it's too complicated. It'll take a while, and I know we're already over time.
We can skip it, or if it's like a short explanation on how, you can just tell me how, but we don't really need to go through the whole thing.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think you won't encounter this enough for it to be valuable. I think you'll always be mating with your queen. So we'll just go through some positions, and I'm going to show you a series of blunders, and I want you to think about how to not blunder in your own games by looking at these positions and like learning some rules essentially. So what you want to do to not blunder is essentially you want to look at your opponent's last move and ask yourself the following four questions. Is this move directly attacking any of my pieces? Is the move uncovering another piece and thus indirectly attacking one of my pieces? Is the move preparing some threat? Is the move threatening to mate me? And then I want you to come up with two candidate moves and calculate four moves in any single line. So those are like the four things that I want from you to not blunder as much. And don't worry about like remembering them or anything. I'll write this out and send it to you. But essentially, I want to go through these four positions here and then talk about them essentially. So what's the threat after black plays b4 here? So black just played
There's
this.
the discovered attack on the rook and the threat on the knight.
Yeah, exactly. I'm glad you saw that. A lot of people would only see the attack on the knight and they would move the knight, right? But after takes, you have you lose your rook. So definitely good job on you for seeing that this actually uncovers an attack. Okay. This is the second position. What's the idea behind d5 by white here? Why did white play this?
Um, looks like just attacking the center.
Okay, but what's like the threat? What am I threatening to do? If black plays something like this, what would you play?
Take the pawn. Or, no, the fork.
Yes, very good. So I'm glad that you realized this. A lot of people wouldn't realize that what white's real threat with d4 here is actually d5. A lot of people immediately they gravitate towards this capture because especially as beginners for some reason, you guys always want to just capture everything that you can. But you know, yeah, yeah. But the real threat behind d4 was obviously d5, and now this just wins a piece, and the game is, presumably won. Uh, So yeah, whenever your opponent makes a move, right, don't just try and think of it as a capturing threat, but try and ask yourself, well, what else could they really be doing here? And then maybe a second later, the d5 idea would come to you, and you wouldn't blunder it away in the game, right? Okay. So position 3, white has just played rook c1, and what's white's threat here?
Um,
Like if black plays something like this.
7th rank, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. This is actually checkmate. Rook c7, the king has no squares because this is entirely blocked off. And yeah. Okay. But what did white miss here? What's wrong with rook c1?
Oh, the bishop.
Yeah, the bishop can just take. So again, this has to come more with like vision essentially, but something you could do in your own games to not blunder this. So let me just here set the position like this. So let's pretend you didn't blunder rook c1, and instead you were in this position where you had a choice. Instead of just calculating the fact that, well, yeah, after rook c1 I can mate, maybe also think of one more idea just in your head, just for fun. It could be something like g4 threatening g5, and then, even if it's by accident, you would see that there's a bishop here, right? And if you're only focused on this half of the board, I find that new players tend to tunnel vision, and then they miss out, and then they, just blunder their rook.
Yeah, I think I've had a habit of tunnel visioning on like 5-head ideas before. Just like an 8-move adventure that'll eventually lead to a checkmate.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's interesting. If you find that that's a problem for you, like a serious one, where you just always want to be like some cool, like, super GM calculating like a 20 move line or something, just remind yourself that, for us normal people, if it doesn't happen in 3 moves, it doesn't exist.
That's a good rule.
Yeah. Here, I'll write that down for you too. Okay. Anyways, look at this 4th position and tell me what's wrong. Or, yeah. Okay, first of all, what's the point of knight h4? And then tell me why it's wrong.
What's forking the rooks?
Okay, yep, that's the point. Now, what's wrong with it?
Oh, they're going to be taken by the queen.
Yeah. So this is something that has actually happened, I mean, probably countless times in beginner games, where, well, for one, white blunders by playing knight h4, thinking that he's forking the 2 rooks, and black reacts because they think that their opponents are like playing perfectly or something, so they just like play something like rook f2 and then just lose the exchange and say, okay, well, whatever. I mean, I'm down a rook, but this is still playable. Or sorry, I'm down the exchange, but this is still playable. In reality, the chances are at your rating, or even at double or triple your rating, the chances of your opponent just hanging a piece are so high that you should literally ask yourself every single move, does this hang a piece? Because I kid you not, there's so many games, and I have like, I have a few friends that are low rated, and it's actually ridiculous to me the amount of games that are just decided by an opponent hanging a piece or themselves hanging a piece. Right, so always like do like a check and always ask yourself, is my opponent just blundering here? Because chances are they probably are.
Okay. I guess the vision aspect of chess is what I'm struggling with the most. Like, if I have enough time, I can normally find the tactic or the good move to make. But I just struggle to see the long diagonals and lines that's covered.
Yeah. Yeah. So off of this like one session, my actual advice for you would definitely be to do a bit more mating practice on your own, since we didn't get time for it today, and also to play longer time controls. Like 10-0 and 15-10 are my recommendations for you. I know that might sound like it would take forever, but really, like, it's as long as like a 2K match, like if you, I don't know, I don't know how many video games you play, but like it's essentially the same as like one round of a video game if you play like a 10-0 game. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I'm actually going to be ending the recording here. And
yeah. Sorry, I was talking to somebody. What do you say?
If that's all you want for today, then we can end here. We can also go back and do the mating practice, or even look at the Roy Lopez if you'd still like, or we can end the session here with any of your questions that you might have.
If you want to run over the Roy Lopez, I'd like to hear it.
Okay, great. The Roy Lopez is my recommendation for an opening with white every single time, just because of how many lines, or how many attacking lines it gets to. E4, E5, and again, remember that if you're playing with something like H6, you want to control the center with D4. But anyways, E4, E5, Knight F3, Knight C6, Bishop B5. And this is a long-term pin, right? Although this pawn hasn't moved yet, once it does, Black's knight will no longer be defending this pawn. If that makes sense. Okay, anyways, play continues, Knight F6. And here, what's your next move? What I would recommend for you to play here is actually castles. Well, why are you castling? Aren't you just giving up this pawn? Well, if black takes this pawn, then it opens up this beautiful diagonal for the rook, and we're able to take advantage of it by playing rook e1. After something like knight to d6, we can play knight takes on e5. And now we have a lot of threats here. So if black gets careless and plays something like taking your bishop because he thinks you've hung your bishop, how can you win the game here with white?
It'd be knight g6, right?
Okay, and after I defend with my bishop? You just take the rook?
You take with... Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you can just take the rook. So that's a good idea. The best idea is actually knight takes on c6. And what this does is that it opens up this check, right? And it also attacks the queen.
Oh.
Yeah. And after black defends, we can just take the queen and we're very, very happy, right?
And then he can't castle either.
Yeah, you can't even castle.
That's big brain shit.
Yeah, for sure. If, so after you castle, that's a common line that I'm sure your opponents will blunder into at least 1,000,000 times. So I would definitely recommend it for you, and you can always come back to this to study it later if you have time. Other ideas that I want you to think of, if you want to play passive, let's say you're playing against someone that's rated like 1200 or something, they're like way higher than you are. You might want to play something like d3, because this is essentially a very solid opening, and after just some natural moves, you'll realize that white has a nice center here, all our developmental moves come naturally, and the game kind of just makes sense. Yeah? Okay. Other variations include taking. So after something like this, which was the position we initially reached at Roy Lopez, we can play bishop takes c6. If d takes c6, do you know why we can't capture this pawn? Knight takes c5 is a blunder. Do you know why? Or can you figure out why?
I assume because he's gonna move the bishop out.
Like here? Or here?
No, the white square bishop.
Oh, here?
That got opened up.
Oh, like this. Because of that. Okay.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, that's definitely an idea. There's also an immediate punishing move, and the move is queen d4. Right? Because you have to ask yourself in a position, well, which of my opponent's pieces are not protected? And the answer is obviously this knight and this pawn, right? So a move like queen d4 attacks both of those pieces, right? Forking it essentially, in a weird way, right? And if we put something like knight d3, then black can just take, and after we defend with our queen, black even has bishop out to f5, and now he's ready to castle. He has 3 pieces developed, you only have 2, and you still have to castle as well, so you're really behind here, right? So this is a common idea, and I don't want you to fall for it. The other move that I want you to explore possibly is d4, challenging the center. After something like e takes, you can just castle, gambiting this pawn for half a second. If bishop c5, you have e5, and after the knight moves, as you can see, we can even just play c3, because if black captures, then we just win the knight. And if black doesn't capture, if black goes back with the bishop, like they should, then we have a beautiful center, and we have magnificent pieces, everything works, everything is flowing, and we have an easy game ahead of us. Okay, so that's the Roy Lopez, and it's actually what I would recommend over the Queen's Gambit, just because it gives your opponent more room to make mistakes. With the Queen's Gambit, there are some ideas, right? We discussed this one trap earlier with if your opponent takes, then you do have, the e3, b5, a4 line, and if you remember this, we can just capture back immediately, or if your opponent defends even longer, then you have this. That's something important to remember. But other than that, there aren't really any opportunities for your opponent to mess up. And at your rating, you should be really, really playing to make your opponent mess up, if that makes sense.
Like tricky stuff.
Yeah, and like tactical stuff, because I mean, you as someone that wants to improve is going to be ready to like mentally give all the thinking power that it takes to calculate something intense like this, or in the Roy Lopez, something crazy like I mentioned earlier with the knight takes on c6 line, winning the queen right after castling. This line, or sorry, well, technically this line. Like, this is something that you're going to be willing to calculate because I told you to, and your opponent isn't because they're rated like 600 or whatever and they're lazy. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Is that all for today?
Yeah, it was very helpful, very informative.
Yeah.
I appreciate the session.
Of course, it was my pleasure. This will be uploaded on YouTube, and I'll send you the link. If you'd like to book another session, just hit me up again. It will again be completely free. I'm working like basically off of donations, because I love teaching chess. If you have any questions, we can take a look at them now, or we can just say bye for now.
Something quick that I wanted to mention. It's kind of like irrelevant to what we were talking about, but when should I decide to long castle versus short castle? Just like generally.
Okay, good question. Good question. Here, let me make a new chapter just for that, real quick. Oh, does it come with this position? My bad. Okay. So when do I long castle versus short castle, right? Now, the idea behind long castling is essentially that you launch these 4 pawns at the enemy's king that's going to be sitting over here. So here, let's just play a normal game out. I don't really know what to like show you per se. Or actually, I guess this is slightly better. And then maybe after something like this, you just long castle. And this is a position that you might reach. It's probably been reached like a million times before. But the point of long castling is essentially that these 4 pawns over here are supposed to break through your opponent's defenses, okay? And the idea is that your king is going to be safe on the other side of the board so that you can launch all these pawns. Because generally speaking, you aren't allowed to launch these pawns because your king is sitting right here and it becomes very vulnerable, right? So when can you choose to long castle? Well, a lot of the times the position will ask for it. If your opponent is castling kingside very, very early on and you want to like punish that somehow, or if you think that you're stronger than your opponent, then it's generally a good idea to castle opposite sides of the board just so that you can launch your attack better than your opponent can. And obviously the idea here is very simple. You're going to push all these pawns, you're going to bring your rook here, you're going to bring your queen here, and then you're going to like kill them on the king side. But this isn't exactly easy to achieve, and I would say that 90% of the time, if not 95% of the time, you'll be castling kingside, like a good Russian schoolboy. But if you do choose to castle queenside, just be aware that black also has the same attacking ideas that you do, right? Black can easily start with something like this, and after you move your bishop, he'll gain even more tempo. And now you're starting to be a little suffocated here, and black has the same ideas of expansion that you do, right?
Yeah.
So this is a little more tricky, and it's definitely something that could be fun. It's all about tempo and time, and I don't know. Even at my level, like at an 1800, 1900, 2000 like playing level, I would say I wouldn't recommend queenside castling just because of all the nuances involved. But if it's something that you want to study, like if there's a specific line, that's the only really place where you would regularly play the where you would regularly queenside castle. So just for like your purposes, pretty much always kingside castle and use the pieces as described in the Roy Lopez with these ideas right here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alright.
Thank you.
Yeah. I don't have any more questions.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for your time. I really, really super duper appreciate you taking this leap of faith on me and giving me this opportunity. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
And thank you for the free session. You too.
Have a good day.